Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
This computer. All right. Oh, click the clock. All right, ready? Lips, teeth, tip of the tongue. Yeah. Welcome back to another episode of the Advancement Podcast. Hey, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, if you could go on wherever you listen to your podcast and rate us and subscribe, help us spread the word. If you're watching, go to Facebook or YouTube and either like or subscribe. Helps us advance the mission of Jesus and helps us spread the news of the podcast all over the world. I am your host, Todd Barham, here with the lead consultant of Advancement, Timothy Dominic. Where?
I was in a meeting this past week, and there was a whole group. There was a group of there were 5 guys in there, and they had listened to the podcast, and they called me Dominic the whole meeting.
Well, at least they didn't call you old man or old Tim.
Well, there were some of them in there that are kind of in my bracket, maybe a little boy. So they were a little more genteel about that. But Dominic, they were all over Dominic. Dominic.
Yeah,
I said, "What you?" And they're like, "You told us to listen to the podcast."
Oh, yeah.
That's right. I said, "That's all right."
So it's my fault.
I don't care.
It's my fault.
You know what?
I mean, actually, it's your mom's fault. I mean, she named you.
That's
Dominic.
right. She did. And it's all. I'm good.
I assume it was.
I've lived for over 50 years with the name Dominic, so you know.
Hey, I go by my middle name, so everything I sign is Ronnie this, Ronnie that, Ronnie like whatever. I don't care anymore. I don't correct people. So
Well, Ronnie.
yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I looked for my dad, or when my stuff comes in from the district, Reverend Ronnie Barham. I'm like, oh, Dad, you got mail.
Yeah, your dad, Reverend.
Yeah,
I can see that. I can see it.
So how's all this COVID-19 been treating you? Have you seen? Now you're out in the sticks, so has this bothered you that much?
Well, I think COVID affects us all. Reopening is a unique scenario. When you watch the news, you see all of the different things that are going on and all the different challenges, and the debate about masks, no masks, the debate about distance,
Gathering, no gathering.
And one of the things I've found in that is interesting, there's a real dichotomy in the church.
Yeah.
There are those who just don't care.
Yeah.
I'm going to hug, I'm going to put mask, know, and there are pastors
almost laugh in the face.
They do. And when you reopen, pastors are having to go, these people who just don't care.
Yeah.
One young pastor, they did drive-in church, thought it was safe. He had a few chairs set out, and as soon as service was over, people started getting out of their cars and hugging each other. It was like, whoa. He's like, I don't know what to do. How will I ever reel it back? Yeah. So,
well, I mean, that's the way it's been in our town. I mean, we opened yesterday, and when this comes out, we'll have another week or 2 under our belt. But we did the 6 feet. We got the tape measure out, made sure the rows were spaced out, and then we blocked off some rows that were, and then I pull up one of the larger churches in our town, and they did 5 chairs, but they had them in rows. So there was no 6 feet separation. I'm like, well, you kind of did it, but not really.
Well, people, it's different. I mean, and then there's how people, and I think one of the challenges for leaders in this is that you sit in the room and if you're not careful, especially when it's board members and elders and those guys, they'll look at it through their perspective. Well, this is how I feel about it, and that's what we ought to do.
Right.
But we have to remember that as leaders, our job's not I really don't care how you feel about it. It's about how your people feel.
You heard it here first. Tim doesn't care how you feel.
I don't. I mean, it's your opinion and how to respond. It needs to be based on your people, not you. And
and it needs to be based upon experts that know what they're talking about.
Well, I think
that's the issue. Who's the right people to listen to?
well, but even more than experts, I think we have to recognize. So, in my family, there are people in my family group that they're not mask wearers.
Yeah.
They're going everywhere. They have been. The first sign of reopening, man, they were going out to eat, that whole deal. They're those.
Yeah.
And yet I have somebody else in my family who has always been highly susceptible to respiratory diseases or conditions.
Yeah.
And they're 70, and they're wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And and they are close to me.
Yeah.
And so, so now we have to wear masks, so when I go out, other than right here, we've been out after recording the podcast, made sure we sat outside, and I wore a mask.
Yeah.
Todd did, and I wore a mask going in to order food, and those things, because it's not about me.
Yeah.
It's about this person who's in my family. So I think we have to recognize as leaders that that there's this whole diversity in the population. And we were talking.
We're called to guard the sheep.
Yeah, but there's a whole nother. There's a whole
episode.
Whole nother piece of that, because But I think if you land in the middle where you're making the both sides angry, you're probably in the safest place.
Right. Yeah.
That's just going to be the safest place for you. But that's
So last time we talked about vision.
Yeah.
So if you have not listened to that episode, I would like to encourage you to go listen to that episode. You don't have to turn this off. There'll still be some good things in this episode you can get. But we really unpacked vision and what it means to your church, and kind of some pitfalls that we've had in this episode. We really want to look at how can we develop a vision. So that's
where Todd. You can tell. You always know where Todd is in his own ministry place.
Yeah.
He's got this whole.
Yeah.
His passion level goes up.
Oh man. Well, everybody calls me a visionary, so I love vision. Vision's where I landed, and I constantly.
What makes a person a visionary versus a non-visionary?
To be honest, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, well, your visionaries are always thinking in this is my opinion. Okay. Your visionary is always looking out ahead, dreaming of things, looking for the next. You have your visionaries and you have your administrators. Administrators are the here and now. Visionaries are always thinking out ahead, thinking towards what's next. At least that's the way I understand it.
Yeah, I think that visionary people also, they can see vision in everything.
Oh, sure.
It just bleeds out.
My staff gets annoyed that I turn everything into vision.
The hard part is deciding for the higher your vision acumen is deciding what's doable and what needs to just be tossed.
Yeah.
Because I've worked for leaders who had so much vision that they were driving all these different directions all the time. Oh, that's a great idea. We could do it like this, and they can see these. They can see these details, and they're, let's go. And if you're not careful, you keep your people going, which is the thing.
Yeah.
And so sorting, I struggle with that. I can build a plan, I can build a dream, and I walk into a church, I can pick up on their vision, but I walk into a business, I pick up on this. When I think about for Rachel and I looking towards retirement, man, yesterday I started making a plan.
Yeah.
I had a new plan. Everyone's on a twist on something, and I was like, oh no, we could do this and that. And then you have to go, okay, but where's reality? So think for people who call themselves visionaries, or people think they're visionaries, there's always a struggle of discipline.
Yeah.
To say, I don't need that.
Yeah.
We don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do everything.
Yeah.
If people have listened to the podcast or or been in meetings with me, one of the things I talk about again and again and again and again and again is the rule of what I call the law of just enough.
Mhm.
That says I can't do everything, but sometimes I have to, and I only need to do enough to get me to the next level. If I push too hard, then I outpace my and if the vision gets too big, if I release it too early,
Yeah.
the pieces that aren't out there, then what I've done is I stifle, because some people can't handle it,
Yeah.
and I take energy that will move us there, so I have to pace it out.
Mhm.
It's that law of just enough applies, because I only have so much energy. It is really about managing resources.
Right.
And if I pull too many resources to one place and take them beyond where we are, I need to be learning at the next level, but leading at the level we are. So we've got to go up step at a time. So anyway, so the law of just enough, and with vision, that's a huge, probably one of the biggest challenges that we face, that people are not able to maintain the discipline.
Right. Right.
In that area.
So we have I'm sure we have pastors listening and going, all this vision stuff is great. I enjoy it, but how can I develop this? And you offer some things with advancement. Maybe they're interested in that, maybe they're not. So how would you develop a vision?
Well, everything, all the best literature and all the consulting groups that I'm familiar with, including our own, everybody says, number one, you don't develop vision in a vacuum.
Right.
It needs to be, the term that people use in the industry is vision team.
Yeah.
That's something used by multiple authors that's out there. That was coined probably in the late 90s initially, is the term vision team. And so the idea is you don't do this alone. Now, how big do you make those teams? In a small church, I tell people that you begin with the idea of 10% of your church.
Right.
So if I'm a church of under 100, I'm going to want no less than 5 and probably no more than 10.
Okay.
All right. But that's going to include your senior leader and probably their spouse. And I want to say to you, it does not, I don't want all of my elders, my deacons on that.
Okay.
I'll put one on there. I want the most visionary person, because the makeup of this team is, I don't want high management people. I need one person who's a pretty strong manager, but because they'll give us reality. But I need this to be a group of people who can dream a little and can see beyond, who are not completely tied to where we've been, but they understand where we came from.
Yeah.
I think any team is going to benefit from diversity. So
you're saying some board members, some or all staff?
No. It depends. In a small church, you probably don't have that much staff.
Yeah. Well, and I'm trying to get it for both.
I know we're going to get there. We're going to get there. So in this under 100 church, any team, when we talk about diversity, I want male, female. I want long-term in the church, new to the church. I want somebody that's been saved a long time. I want somebody that's younger in the faith, because the diversity of perspectives.
Yeah. Age demographics,
different. I mean, I'm not even opposed to having somebody who's a teenager. If they're mature enough that they can enter into
they can bring a different perspective.
Right. Yeah. So so when I'm in a church between 100 and let's say 300, then I'm okay with that 10% one number. I don't want, in that size church, I don't want less than 10 to 12. And I probably want to cap it around 20 to 25.
Okay.
And to be honest, when I get larger and larger, then I'm going to start putting multiple teams together, but I'm going to have a primary team of probably no more than 25 to 30, because the room gets too big to facilitate good dialogue.
Okay.
Because it's about interacting and dialoguing, having multiple people together, multiple people interacting as you facilitate.
So
now,
in this one, do you want all board, all staff?
I never want all of my elders.
Okay.
I never recommend that.
Okay.
Because
Why is that?
because the elder role requires a certain perspective and mindset.
Okay.
And I don't need that. And what happens is that you get too many of those elders, then people know that, and you'll shut a room down.
Okay.
People will say, well, they're the elders, they're going to make the decision anyway.
Okay.
I'm going to take everything this team does, run it through the elders.
Okay.
But this group's going to build it. Now, what I want is I say one elder, maybe two if I'm in a larger situation, that are the most visionary, forward-leaning people I have, and I want to bring them. And when I have an elder meeting or a board meeting, whatever your term is, a deacon, then when I have that meeting, I can say, okay, let me just report to you guys what's going on. Why don't you make the report? So I have that individual.
Gotcha.
That way the board's not left out.
Right.
They have one of their own is in the process.
Yeah.
But it validates to you because now you don't have to be the reporter. This person can bring that report, can bring that validation component. But these guys already have a role in the church. I don't need to double down on their role, and I don't need their role view to overshadow everybody else's. I'm bringing one person onto this team because I need that perspective, but I don't need this team overloaded with that perspective. Yeah. So, and I would say to your staff question, I probably would not even have all of my staff. I would, if a church has, I'd probably look for 20% of them be my staff.
Okay.
I'd be okay with that. But I don't think I want,
Well, and there's the rub. There's the rub. Who do you exclude, though?
Yeah, but it's not a point of exclusion. It's a point of this is one of the things about a vision team we haven't gotten there is that you're going to want to cycle these things.
Okay.
But if people understand team dynamic, then we're building a team for this moment. Okay. We're looking for and it's just not the time. We've prayed. We've asked the Lord. If I'm in a large church, let's say you're a church of 1,000 and you've got a staff that's 25, 30 people, all of a sudden, if I put all my staff on, now I don't have room for anybody else.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going to say, I want a percentage. And the truth is, the one I don't want is my bean counter because they're going to squat.
How much does it cost?
Yeah. Right. Because that vision, I'm not asking that question.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go down that road. So I'm building this So the first thing is I'm going to build a team. And now I'm going to tell you that you can do this on your own. There's good literature out there, but advancement, there's lots of people. There's a number of consulting groups or coaches.
We're
team
only worried
coaches.
About advancement.
No, we're not. I mean, obviously this is what we do, but I do think that having an outside voice to facilitate, often if you read the literature, there's often people talk about vision retreats. It's kind of a kickoff where you kind of set things in motion.
Having someone outside can kind of find where the
it's a facilitator so that the pastor doesn't have to, so the pastor can be involved in the process rather than having to stay outside of the process.
Right.
Now, once you go deeper in, you don't need that person there all the time.
Right.
And the pastor begins to facilitate. So it's a common practice across consulting and coaching things is that you do kind of a vision retreat followed by a series of meetings where it's fleshed out and finished out.
Okay.
But it's built around this team. So that's the big pieces. And I think the other thing that people always want it fast, methodical, take your time. It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay. I think on average, this is probably a 6-month process.
Okay.
I have seen guys go as long as a year, but probably 6 to 8 months is more the norm.
Okay. Okay. So, what kind of to flesh it out a little bit more, what are some, this, you say this takes 6 months. So for me, being the leader, thinking out ahead, what are some markers that you're looking for? Let's take a moment and hear a word about advancement.
Do you feel like your church is stuck in a rut? Then we've got the answer for you here at Advancement. Do you need some personal coaching or maybe some leadership coaching? We can help you out. Contact the Advancement team at info@advancement.cc or check out the website at advancement.cc.
Now let's get back to the podcast.
Well,
Obviously you have the initial retreat, but what are some markers and some things you're looking to accomplish along the way that kind of helps? Because, some of this is, it's going to take some budget. You got to take it back to board. So what are some markers that can help people see the process and see the value?
So this team is not, they're not your high execution group.
Okay.
They're more about setting those goals out there. And this is where we sense God is asking us to go. When we look back, when we look forward, and together when we dialogue, this is what we sense God saying.
Right.
And so these guys are going to flesh out. They're going to help. This team really is going to be more about helping establish communication.
Okay.
And bringing some of the clarity. So when that communication and clarity, now I take, at the end of this 6 months, I take this back to my board, and they go, and board and staff, and they all go, okay, we can see that. Yes, let's start moving down the road. Now that group begins to identify execution.
Okay.
So what is this team doing? This team is working on, this team is part of it, and what they're doing is going to go through, and there's part of an evaluation process. Okay, if this is what we sense God saying, where's the proof? So they're going to be looking into the church and saying, here we see it, here we see it, here we see it, here we don't see it here. And they're a think tank to help pastor and to help the leadership say, if we don't see it here, how could what we see God saying be put in here? What would that look like over here? Or are we identifying something that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing?
Yeah.
So as a think tank, they get to make recommendations. The truth is, they actually don't have any authority. Okay. The authority lies with the pastor, staff, and board, the deacons, elders, that group. So this team is really just that. We have to explain that they're a think tank. Yeah. We're working these processes out. We're going to
recommending entity.
Wrestle with it, but you have to realize that this has to be a deeply spiritual process.
Okay.
If this is what Jesus is saying, then we have to be here now. Now, everybody's not going to hear it exactly the same way, and sometimes it's not going to come out, and there's going to be tension, and
Sure.
But if there's not any tension, then the team's not actually working.
Right.
If everybody goes, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Then there was no work. Then there was no work being done. So it becomes an evaluative process.
Yeah.
Of what God has said, what we sense God is saying, and where He's taking us, and that means. So because of that, we recommend that guys that people that churches do this every 3 to 5 years. Now, why? It's not that you're going to change the vision. It's to ask the question, okay, are we still doing what Jesus has said? When we look at the way we said what we said we heard from the Lord 5 years ago, okay, if this is what we heard from the Lord, are we still communicating it well?
Yeah.
Are we, is our communication, does it fit the culture and where the church is today? So if your church has grown and that 3 to 5 years, then this is a moment where they're going to bring more clarity. remember in the last episode, I used the illustration of a dot to dot. So the first, if the small church, this group comes out and they say, these are the dots. This is the dot to dot we see. The next time they come together, they say, we're filling in the lines. So there's a point of them bringing more detail.
Okay.
Because, okay, that's true. We haven't missed this, but it feels like that there's something else here. So it's now they've added a shade of blue, right, to the picture.
Yeah. So kind of my primary question, I mean, you've talked about the vision team bringing recommendations and helping shape the vision, helping the staff.
It's so funny. I'm watching you because I'm watching your wheels turn, because you're really in that place where you're needing that new injection of clarity.
Yeah. And so, I'm also trying to help them think through this, because I think out loud, whatever you call that.
It's called a verbal process.
I'm a verbal processor.
Verbal processor.
Yeah, which irritates my staff.
Like,
I wish I knew that you were thinking out loud. I said, well, just always assume I'm thinking out loud.
I know. My son's a verbal processor. I'm a verbal processor, and sometimes my wife she says, "Yeah, just get to the point." I say, well, I gotta go. There's a journey.
I'm getting to the point. So the team comes together, makes recommendations. How does that shape moving forward? Because you said, obviously staff, elders, leadership, they make the final decision. This is a recommending group. So how do you move forward, and how does that shape the vision of what you're doing, what you're not doing? And then how do you utilize that team movement?
Well, okay. I think, number one, some of that is going to be unique to each context.
Okay.
I think that's another reason for an outside voice to say, okay, let's, because there's that.
So you're almost saying the key to all this is the outside voice.
No, I'm not saying that that's the key, because
it helps.
It always helps.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go through Mancini's processes, which are in the books God Dreams and Church Unique I mentioned in the last one, he's going to be your outside coach. He's got his thing and he's going to just do this. But it's, what I have learned over time is there's only so much can fit through the cookie cutter.
Right.
And so having the ability to tweak and twist. I think having a coach, whether they're there in the moment or just to help the pastor process during this time, to say, okay, well, maybe you should to ask the question and see if that team, because sometimes their strongest thing, the thing that's needed most, may be communication.
Yeah.
How do we communicate this? And sometimes it may be the evaluation to say, it feels like we're sluggish and we're not moving towards what God's saying. We all know what God's saying, but we're not moving because we haven't put this vision into a ministry, or we've attached things to it. So I think there's some of that stuff comes over time. It comes out. It's not. My value, my personal value, and one of the things that we often, we within our advancement circles talk about, is the uniqueness of individuals, the uniqueness of congregations, the uniqueness of communities, and that unique combination. And when you're working with those components, you have to be willing to step back and say, okay, we know this is a process that works, but we've got to tweak the elements because of the uniqueness of this leader, situation, context. Because I'll tell you what, I think when you look into vision pieces, it's very easy for churches to look at inward.
Okay.
I think that's a critical component that happens so easily, is that people look inward when they're doing this. If there is not, this is also probably one of the most important things that happens during this season, is that this has to be a process where the harvest is the priority.
Yeah.
where we prioritize the harvest over the congregation.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, if we're not careful, it'll flip.
Yeah.
Because the longer we go, we always turn inward. It's just the nature of the body of Christ. So we have to have this push out, and I think you have to have this prominence of the harvest, which is often which creates a tension and a stretch in this team.
Yeah.
I know I didn't answer your question fully.
Oh, you're
but
good. You're good. You answered it mostly. So, kind of as we're getting to the end here, what would you say to the guy that's like, man, Tim, this just seems like a lot of work. Is this worth my time? Or maybe you've got leaders in a church that's like, man, this seems like a lot. What would your advice be to them?
Anything worth having is worth the work.
Okay.
I know that this is a lot of work, and I've watched people start it and quit.
Yeah.
I've watched people just decide I don't want to do that. But growth, not numeric growth, maturing, that kind of growth spiritually, naturally, in our congregations, in all these that is, I'm gonna use a different word. Growth is what we like to talk about in the church. We talk about transformation. We have all these spiritual things we talk about, but I'm going to just use the most basic word it's change.
Right.
And you go through this process, it will create tension, because you're going to wrestle with, we're going to have to change something.
Yeah.
And if you won't suffer through the pain until, they say you'll what's the saying, that you won't change until the pain of staying the same is too great.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of our listeners are in that place.
Well, but I mean, I don't believe that's God's plan.
Right.
I believe that the Lord would rather have us progress. I mean, why wait till it's so painful? There are always going to be some areas in my life that I don't see, that are blind spots. In our church, they're blind spots. And when they're revealed, it's like, oh my gosh.
Right.
And then we have to make a choice. But this idea of progressive movement, progressive development, progressive growth, dare I say progressive transformation and or change. And I hope that every pastor would say, okay, we can go down this road. Honestly, I don't expect that most do.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't force somebody.
Right.
You have to wait until they say, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even then, sometimes when they think they're ready, it's harder than they thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're wrapping up the end of our time. Do you want to ask me that key question you always ask?
I always like to ask. So what's your takeaway?
So a couple things you said that got me. The law of just enough. I probably always have to tell myself that. And I know you know that. But then you don't develop vision in a vacuum, and it's slow and steady wins the race. I'm a very hurry up, get this done kind of guy. I'm not a crock pot. I'm a air fryer.
Yeah, well, I think usually, all right, you talk about being a visionary, when you have a high vision acumen, you've got lots of dreams and lots of things. There's always a press for time, because we can't wait. We've got to get this done, because there's the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Yeah. But everybody can't move at that rate.
Yeah.
Now, the flip side of that is the pastor who says, I'm more concerned about there are things out ahead, but I'm more concerned about this group here and not hurting them.
Yeah.
Then I said, we'll never move, because if I move, you're
gonna hurt them. Yeah.
I'm gonna hurt somebody. And we have to live in the tension in between. We have to move. We should, let me back. Yes, we should be moving forward, stretching. but we can't do too much.
Right.
So
It's a constant shift.
Shift.
Constant tension.
Yes. I love this conversation. This is a place that I just, my mind is captivated with, because it's really about us moving towards Jesus and changing daily, or in regular seasons, rather than only in the moment of desperation.
Right.
Which in this COVID season, I think what it's done is it has forced people who were unwilling to change in some areas. They've had to make changes. There was a research done that said that only 48% of churches had, this is from the Washington Post, had a online giving ability. Of all the nearly 30,000, the 30-something thousand congregations across all Christian faiths, 48% had online giving before COVID.
Yeah.
And now they've raced to try and get, in Catholicism, because of the way their system was set up.
Yeah.
I think there was less than 1% of Catholic parishes had an online giving opportunity. So they had no way to get their money.
You've been listening to Advancement. We've been pushing that for a long time.
But I'm just saying, so forced change. And the other thing that this is getting us down a whole nother road, so I better quit. But the difficulty with forced change is the change that's most likely to be rebelled against and not be a lasting change.
Right.
Because I don't want to do it because you forced me to.
I mean, how many of these churches you think are just going to drop it when we go back?
Well, I don't know. I think it'll depend on if they see, if they begin to think, well, it costs too much, or they're taking a percentage of our money, and so it's just
that's the constant rub with us is the it's taking that percentage, but it's like, well, would you get it without that? You never know.
Right.
So
I love this conversation.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on another episode of the Advancement Podcast.
And
we'll see
if
you
need information, reach out to us on the website, reach out to us on Facebook, or
email info@advancement.cc.
And we'd love to see your comments. Make comments on down on the episodes.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you next time on the
Advancement Podcast.
All right.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.